All right, welcome to today's verdict. I'm your host and trial attorney, David Lesh. We have three distinct topics today. First one, we're going to be discussing delivery workers and their ability to get a bump in pay. But the question, who's paying for it? Is Dashlane paying for it? Is Uber Eats paying for it? Is the restaurant paying for it? Or are you paying for it? It's interesting. Second thing we're going to be talking about here today is we're going to be talking about preschool and the fact there are children with disabilities who have not been given seats in certain classrooms, mostly because there aren't enough classrooms. And believe it or not, it's illegal. We have somebody who's going to be coming up from the Advocates for Children of New York to discuss this particular issue. I find it very, very interesting, and I definitely, have a feeling in myself in terms of my thoughts on it. And lastly, we're going to be talking about a day in the life type of videos that are being presented by legal aid when a criminal is being sentenced, videos that help judges decide whether you should have a lighter or a tougher sentence. Very, very fascinating way to look at things, because certainly a picture speaks 1,000 words. So anyway, you're going to want to hear what both the filmmaker has to say, as well as Nicole Mull, who is from the Legal Aid Society. So stay tuned. We have a lot coming at you. Today's verdict starts right now. Okay, welcome back to today's verdict. I'm your host and trial attorney, David Lesh. We have with us today Legia Gualpa, I hope I'm saying that the correct way, from the Workers' Justice Project. Legia, how are you doing today?
I'm very good. Thank you for having me today.
What made you get into this field? Was it family, friends?
Yeah, I mean, these issues are very personal to me because my parents are also low-wage workers, immigrants from Ecuador who grew up in the South Bronx. For many years, my mom worked in the garment industry without basic labor protections and without union representation.
Let's talk a little bit about DoorDash and Seamless and some of the businesses that are actually giving us our daily food to our doors. Tell me a little bit about the business. How was it created? Just tell us a little bit of a background of DoorDash, let's say.
Yeah, so since before even the pandemic, I think these tech companies have grown to provide services to communities in making accessible for communities to have access to food, groceries, things to be delivered at the convenience of every person. And since the pandemic, actually, delivery became essential part of New Yorkers' life, especially not being able to go out, and especially in New York, where there is harsh weather and you can't go out because maybe there be flooding in your neighborhood or there is snowstorms, or making it harder. And these companies have taken advantage of a critical need into our city and pretty much coming into our neighborhoods, transforming what food delivery has looked like in our city. Digitalizing a industry that has allowed to dehumanize workers, to eliminate the human interaction, even with communities and the restaurants, and even workers with consumers. And what that has created is a massive industry that tech companies are profiting in. We're talking about DoorDash, who exploded, who now has made, since the pandemic, over $300 million in growth, or probably more.
Well, who pays them? I mean, who was paying the DoorDash worker? The restaurant, the person who's getting the food, a combination of both? Who pays them?
Well, in this case, before minimum pay, it was the company who was mostly paying them, which was a $2 to a $4 trip for a 32-hour delivery trip. So that means a worker, I think, owned data of the city from the Department of Consumer Affairs, proof that including tips, a worker was making about $11 in some sense. That's below minimum wage. Before minimum wage, most of the workers was partially a percentage paid by the company, but half of their income was dependent on tips. So most of their income was dependent on the generosity of New Yorkers. We said that that's not the right thing. That's not a dignified wage. That's not a steady income for families. And that's not how essential workers should be paid on based on the generosity. So right now, after passing a minimum wage law, it is up the responsibility for the company to pay directly workers either per trip or on-call time, $17.96 or per trip, which is about 50 cents per minute. And that has significantly brought in increased wages, from 30 to 50% wage increase. And that's significant.
Are the consumers pushing back on that? Are they not happy that it's being put on their shoulders?
It's we're monitoring the impact that's having on the industry. I think there is, a concern about consumers, how difficult. I think there's been articles being written about, how a $10 delivery is turning into a $20, $30 delivery, which, it's not fair. But at the same time, I think it's part of the business model these companies are designed to, make a lot of money and, extract the wealth from the restaurants because they charge fees to the restaurants prior minimum pay. They charge fees to the consumer while they get to keep most of the money and not have to pay workers.
Where are we going? Where are we heading with this? Where do you see the future? Are we going to increase the amount that the workers are going to be getting an hour? Is it going to stay the same for a little bit? What do you think?
So what we're already seeing is that workers are getting a significant wage increase. Nobody can dispute that. Workers are seeing changes. I think what our goal for the next couple of years is to transform gig work into good work, where workers are making a dignified wage, where we're also holding these corporations accountable, not only to treat workers well, but to run a business model that is fair to everybody, to the restaurants, to the consumers, to the workers. It is possible if we're able to shift the culture and transform this industry in a better way, that it's more dignified. We're engaging consumers because we want to make sure there is actually a customer delivering justice campaign where we want to hear back from consumers as well as how we transform this industry in a more ethical business and also in a job that is dignified for everybody. We know that these companies are these companies are not even based in our city. They're in Silicon Valley, somewhere other states who are coming pretty much running our city without respecting workers, without actually extracting the wealth of restaurants as well, who are being taken advantage by these multi-billion-dollar corporations. We want to make sure that whoever comes to do business in our city treats New Yorkers fairly, and it's held accountable and responsible for running a more ethical business.
What other things does the Workers' Justice Project work on?
So we're an industry-based organization that is not only organizing app delivery workers, we're also organizing construction workers in the residential industry, which is another sector where workers are underpaid, unrepresented, and also house cleaners that, despite the fact that they have won through the Domestic Bill of Rights basic protections, are still excluded from worker protections without the ability to collectively organize. And our goal is to continue to transform these industries to make sure workers are paid fairly and treated with dignity.
Well, I think you said enough. We really appreciate it. You told us a ton about it. And to be honest with you, we want these workers to be getting paid more. They do so much for us, and they're really underappreciated. Hopefully you can come back in the next couple of months and let us know what's going on in the industry.
Absolutely. We will keep monitoring and as well informing workers who many of them don't know about these new protections, who are important to make sure that they're part of, not only get protected, but keep on organizing. And thank you for inviting me.
It's our pleasure. All right, stay with us. Today's Verdict has so much more right after this. Okay, welcome to today's verdict. I'm your host and trial attorney, David Lesh. We have with us today Betty Baez with the Advocates for Children in New York City. How are you doing today, by the way?
I'm doing well. I'm staying warm. Thanks.
Tell us a little bit about your organization first, if you could.
Yeah, Advocates for Children of New York. We're a nonprofit organization that works to protect the educational rights of all New York City students. And we really focus on students, or we start with students from birth through they graduate high school. We serve children of all different types of populations. I lead our early childhood education project, so we focus on children from birth to age 5. We have projects that work with children in temporary housing, children who are in foster care, immigrant students, all students with disabilities, all with the goal of ensuring that every child has access to a high quality education in New York City.
I don't know which politician made the promise. I don't know when the promise was made exactly, but there was a promise that every child in this city will be able to have pre-K education. Am I correct?
Yes.
Who did this and when was this done?
Sure. So there is a combination, right? There's a legal requirement that for students with disabilities who need a specialized classroom, so special education services in a classroom of 12, 8, 6 students, those children have a legal right to a preschool special education program. That's in federal law, that's in state law, that is a legal requirement. Additionally, in New York City, we also have universal pre-K, so preschool for all 4-year-olds, that was started during the de Blasio administration, and have also launched 3K for every 3-year-old. So 3K is not yet universal, but it's had been expanding. And so there's, through those two systems, through pre-K, 3K, and preschool special education services, that's really what the majority of the preschool landscape looks like in New York City.
Okay, so there's pre-K, got that. There's 3K, know that. And then there's the education for those with any type of disability, correct?
Yeah, and with children with disabilities, many children with disabilities can attend 3K and pre-K for all programs, which are the general education programs, right? They're the ones that families can apply to, run by the Department of Education. That application process opens next week, I believe, or sorry, it's now open, and it'll go through March 1st. For children with significant disabilities, the Department of Education is required to identify and provide those children as special education classrooms. Families don't apply to those programs. The Department of Education is responsible for matching children to those programs.
All right, so I got the glasses on here. So Kim Sweet, the executive director of the Advocates for Children of New York, issued the following statement. 1 year ago, we stood with Mayor Adams as he announced he was addressing an historic inequity for preschoolers and disabilities and guaranteeing that every child who needed a preschool special education class would have one by the spring of 2023. Has that happened? Yes or no?
That has not happened, unfortunately.
Why not?
Yeah, well, so although the city did add some seats last year during the 2022-2023 school year, we know that by the end of the school year, there were about 1,100 students who had a legal right to one of these special education classroom seats who did not receive one. So these are children with significant disabilities who were at home or were attending a general education class where they were not making progress because they didn't have that special education classroom available to them.
By the way, this is the law from what you're telling me, right? This passed in Albany or passed the city council. Where was this passed?
The requirement comes from the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, from the IDA. So there's federal law. It's also within the state law. There's a requirement that every child with a disability who needs one of these classrooms, and these are children who are identified through evaluations that are conducted through organizations that contract with the Department of Education. It's determined at an individualized education program meeting where the Department of Education and the family participate together to determine what services the child needs. These are children who have been found not only eligible, but recommended for one of these specialized programs. And unfortunately, the Department of Education has not been able to provide them those programs because there's a shortage of preschool special education classrooms in New York City.
Apparently, there's not enough classrooms because these special education children need special classrooms. Am I correct?
Yes. And so it is a combination, right? If there's no classroom, there aren't those seats. And many of the reasons why we've heard, at least from some community-based organizations, of why they're struggling to open classrooms, it's because they're also struggling to identify teachers who can work in those classrooms to help them expand.
All right, so 1 year ago, the mayor noted that the city's systematic failure to serve preschoolers with disabilities was unfair and just wrong. It's also illegal. Well, what's next? What are you going to do about it?
We are continuing to push the city to make sure that they're opening these classrooms, either having the New York City public school systems open the classrooms on their own or partner with the community-based organizations that have for many years run these classrooms to ensure that they're well supported and able to open additional classrooms and seats to serve every child who needs one. Because it is a legal mandate, as we've established. Unfortunately, we know that the preliminary budget did not include funding for the continuation or expansion of these programs. So we're going to continue our advocacy on the city level and also on the state level.
You know, there comes a time where you have to enter a courtroom and hold certain people accountable for failing to meet conditions, certainly conditions that turn out to be illegal if you don't end up, complying with the law. So we'll leave it there because I'm not very happy about this at all, and I'm sure you're not happy either. But hopefully you can come back maybe in the next couple of weeks and let us know what's been going on.
Definitely. And for individual families, advocates for children, we provide that direct legal representation and support to individuals' families who contact us through our helpline or by email. So we are able to advocate on the individual level. And also we're doing that systemic change, as I mentioned. So we're here as a resource, but unfortunately, we haven't been satisfied with the level of change or the progress.
All right, well, Betty, thank you very much. It was a pleasure having you, and stay warm on a very, very cold January day.
Thank you. You too.
All right, take care. All right, stay with us. Today's Verdict has so much more right after this. Okay, welcome back to Today's Verdict. I'm your host and trial attorney, David Lesh. We have two for the price of one right now. First we have Nicole Mull, a senior attorney with the Legal Aid Society, and a filmmaker joining us, David Simpson. Both of you, thanks for being here today.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Happy to be here.
And let's just kind of get to what we're talking about here. We're talking about documentary types of films that are made really like a day in the life of someone and using it to your advantage to show a judge or a jury or somebody that your life is something that should be considered when either sentencing or even deciding an outcome. Am I correct?
It's mostly sentencing, yes.
Sentencing. Okay. Now, in the personal injury field, which is what I do, there's a lot of a day in the life that we try and show to the jury. We tend not to use videos, although I've seen it done. It's probably a brilliant idea now that I think about it. But you using it in the criminal field, whose idea was this? Who came up with this idea?
Well, this was something that started in federal court that I noticed about 5-6 years ago. And I couldn't understand why we don't use it in state court, first of all, and also why public defenders don't use it. And the goal is really fairer sentences. It's to achieve fairer sentences that take into consideration the entire human being, their circumstances, the reasons around the incident sometimes, the reasons that they're involved, the issues that they have in their lives that may not be obvious to the criminal justice system when they're accused. And it's not only a day in the life that we do. We also involve experts to testify about various aspects of our client's life. of the situation. I mean, they're very unique. Each video is very unique, obviously, because they're very case and person specific, but it's more to show that to the prosecution and to a judge that the sentences that are proposed by the prosecution don't take into account the human being that our clients are and the circumstances that led them into the situation they're in.
David, let me ask you a question. When you start filming, do you film? I know you can't film before the actual crime occurs because there'd be no reason to film, but can you piece together snippets of things that the person was like before the alleged crime, or maybe that the fact that there is a crime now? Do you understand what I'm asking you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what we do is interview the client themselves, family members, people who know them from the community, and we weave together what that person was and is during this whole incident. So it's testimony. I don't want to say testimony, but it is that narrative that family, friends tell us who this person is, what their character is like, what they spent their time doing, and we tell that story.
It's funny that you say testimony, actually. It makes me think that if there's an appeal or there's something that could be used as some kind of appeal, that you could go back to this video and look at certain things to maybe help or hurt, depending on whether the person did or did not commit a crime or something like that. But that's for a whole nother area of the law. But
well, this is part of a negotiation, right? So it's not part of wouldn't be part of an appeal. It's just part of the negotiation process.
It is. Okay. So let's talk about how long these documentaries are. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, a half an hour, something else?
So they generally tend to be on the around 20 to 25 minutes is where we're landing with a lot of these videos. Sometimes they can be a little bit longer if there are lots of interviews or lots of individuals that want to participate and be able to tell that narrative, but around 20 to 25 minutes.
All right. There are those on the other side of the fence. Certainly prosecutors feel that this is unfair. It's basically using it as a way to portray somebody who committed a crime in a very good light. And that's not beneficial to the victims, who feel that, yes, they can give victim statements as well, but it's not the same thing as an actual video when you give a victim statement. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, first of all, I don't know that we're portraying the person in quote unquote a very good light. They hear about more than just the one worst moment in our client's life. They listen to members of our community, employers, friends, families, service providers speak about their experiences with our client. They hear about it in a completely different lens than just reading on a piece of paper. It's very easy to discount a person based on what's written on one sheet of paper or what a lawyer tells you. But it's a lot harder to discount an entire human being when you get immersed in their entire life through visual and oral information from real life people. And you can judge for yourself as the viewer how persuasive it is. You can also go and interview these folks and ask more questions if you want. There is nothing that prevents a prosecutor from further investigating what we present. We typically, over the years, this information has always been presented in writing. And this is just something, now that we're in where we are technologically, this is an opportunity for the viewer to not only read, but see and judge for themselves what they see.
Does the video have to be authenticated in such a way? A lot of things can be doctored, and although a picture speaks 1,000 words, but does have to be authenticated in some way. Does a judge authenticate it? Does somebody else authenticate it to make sure this is the actual the person? It's not the twin of the person. You know, it's really happened last year or not 10 years ago, that kind of thing. Who does that?
So this is a video pre-pleading investigation report. The pre-pleading investigation reports that we turn over to the prosecution to try to start a conversation about negotiations are just that. They are written documents that add certificates, letters from doctors, etc. None of that is authenticated. We are all officers of the court. I have an obligation to be very forthcoming, and I am. And I do not represent anything that I do not believe is correct and fair and true.
David, very quickly, are you enjoying this type of work? Is this something that you enjoy doing?
Yeah, absolutely. It has been it's been an opportunity for me to learn about my community, to see what the effects of mass incarceration have been on communities, the Black and brown folks that are often targeted by the criminal legal system. And it's been incredibly rewarding. And I enjoy the work itself, the creativity that's involved, the problem solving that is involved in helping to bring multiple subject matter experts to bear on an individual and their issues and problems. I think it's super rewarding. It's
all right, well, we're going to run out of time. I'm going to leave it there. Nicole and David, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Picture speaks 1,000 words, as I said before. Hopefully you'll come back the next couple of months and let us know how the program's going, if you could.
Thank you.
It's our pleasure. All right, stay with us. Today's Verdict has so much more right after this. Well, that's all we have for today. I'd like to thank our guests for joining us, and of course, you, the viewers, for watching. If you have an issue or a topic you'd like to see on a future edition of Today's Verdict, feel free to email me at davidlesh@bronxnet.org. Until the next time, know your issues, reach a verdict. I will see you in 2 weeks. Stay warm.